Welcome to the Sober Podcast. I am your host, Jamie Brickhouse, and our sober celebrity guest today is Laura Solomon. She is the mother of a recovering addict and a compassionate, informed intake counselor and an award-winning counselor, I must say, and trauma specialist from Advanced Rapid Detox. Thanks for joining us on Sober Podcast today, Laura. I'm excited to have you on. So, we like to pick a topic, and there's so many topics we could go with you and your background, but wanted to talk about how to combat trauma in the addiction field. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Welcome.
It's always a blessing to be able to help. So my background is deeply engaged personally and professionally in trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trauma certified in terms of personal and professional coaching. And what I have discovered is that as the mother of a recovering addict for the last 8 years and doing my job as an intake counselor for a substance abuse treatment center, everybody talks about addiction. What brought you to addiction? Was it a gateway drug that brought you to addiction? Was it a person, a place, or a thing that took you to addiction? But what I've discovered in helping 500 patients every year detox from opiates,
Mm-hmm.
I would say overwhelmingly, trauma brought them to addiction. I would say a solid, I'm great with percentages, 75% of our patients were brought to addiction to numb out emotional or physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
25.
And are you the people you're talking about? Are you and when you say addicts, are you saying mostly drug addicts, opioid addicts? Or are you talking about alcoholics as well?
That's the hazard of Zoom. Is the dog barking? So our patients who come to Advanced Rapid Detox are people who are coming to us to sleep through opiate withdrawals.
Okay.
So we see patients who are using pain meds, fentanyl, people who are dependent but ready to be done with life-saving Suboxone and methadone, and patients who are on tramadol. And again, 25% of our patients were put on those meds by their doctor. So they are, victims, if you will, of the opiate crisis. And the other 75% are people who took drugs not for fun, not to get high, not because there's something so thrilling about it, but they got stuck.
Yeah. Okay.
And they come to us because, we know the reason people don't come off opiates is because the withdrawals are brutal, especially in today's generation of fentanyl.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with us, we have them under sedation while they sleep through the withdrawals, and then we get them right on Vivitrol to eliminate the cravings. But overwhelmingly, in both my intake and the social work piece of it that our social worker addresses, it's at least 75% trauma-based.
And what kind of work do you do with them to address the trauma and to get past it and to become clean or sober?
Right. So more than anything, I think that it's about recognizing that it's trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm 60 years old, and in my generation, people didn't talk I remember being young and people would say, so-and-so has cancer,
Right.
or,
Whispered, yes.
they'd whisper it, or so-and-so is divorced. Well,
Mhm.
now, in
So and so
2000,
is gay.
yeah, oh, please,
Yeah.
that's enough, right? Um, and today we yell gay, we yell divorce and cancer. Nobody, that's not a stigma, but unfortunately, the things that create trauma are still a stigma, and so is substance abuse disorder.
Right.
And so, more than anything, the way we assist patients initially is by letting them know it's not you. You're not the only person who's had these 10 traumas, big and small. It's everyone everywhere. And the word trauma can mean a little t or a big T. you know, I've had patients who say, my trauma was my dog died. And I have other patients who tell me their children were decapitated in front of them in a car accident.
Oh my God. Hmm.
Now, for both people, that's trauma. And that led them to want to or choose to numb out their emotions. We can't judge whose trauma is enough. For me, losing a dog might not be so traumatic because I've experienced real heavy duty trauma in my life.
Right.
But for that person, it's significant enough for them to numb their emotional pain. So, what do? We start by letting them know this is normal.
Hmm.
And for somebody like you or me, Jamie, who's been around the block, uh, we recognize trauma and what it does to us personally. So we try to work with the clients to help them understand that what they're experiencing is normal and it can be addressed in many different ways, whether it's with therapy, um, different therapy modalities. We see a lot of patients with post-traumatic stress disorder. We recommend counseling and help them find resources. We put them in touch with different treatment centers that have different modalities based on their situation.
Yeah.
And we have, really, what's most important is connection. We're not a one and done type of place. Our patients, we still talk to them. I have 3,700 patients in my caseload, and I still talk to all of them all the time if they're willing.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting what about trauma and addiction, and I spoke to another a rehab counselor a few weeks ago, and he said alcoholics are born and addicts are created or made. I think, meaning what he was saying, I got his point, was that alcoholic, like for a lot of alcoholics, tend to be it tends to be a character trait or a genetic trait. I kind of believe that for me personally, because I know it runs on my father's side of the family.
But does trauma run on your father's side of the family?
Right. No. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. But actually, I'm kind of going in with what you're saying about trauma is that with addicts, with drug addicts, and of course, there are many alcoholics who are both. And in my story, I used drugs, but as well, but alcohol. I was able to put down the drugs, but not the alcohol.
Got it.
And and I kind of understood what he was saying, that because I kind of believe that, up until this point, really until that conversation, I thought, oh, well, alcoholism, opiate addiction, you're an addict or you're not, and now I see the difference, and that some people can become addicted who are not necessarily genetically inclined towards that. And then you're furthering that by saying that trauma can create that.
Right. And there's a wonderful book that I just read called It Didn't Start With You. And it really talks about the genetic piece of all of us. The best example I can tell you is my father was a boater. He came over on a boat from Poland and he was 5 years old. and some sadistic priests swung him over the side of the boat to punish him for something.
Mm.
And he had an 80-year fear of water. Well, I've never been swung over a boat. I have a terrible fear of water. It didn't start with me.
Right. I have a fear of water too.
So I think that, you know, from a generationally traumatic standpoint, some of these habits or choices that we make are rooted in what we learn growing up. And you know, my mother committed suicide. My father was a drinker, and I had to make a cognizant effort to change that path because that's what I learned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you've got to unlearn that.
Right.
We're going to take a little commercial break, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. So stick with us.
Hi, I'm Sonia, the founder of Everbloom. We help you change your relationship with alcohol through connection and conversation. We provide small group meetings where you can share your story and get the encouragement and support you need to achieve your goals. Whatever your goals are, we're a judgment-free space. You can find us at joineverbloom.com, BLUME, and try us out with a free meeting.
And we're back talking to Laura Solomon and discussing trauma, the role of trauma in addiction. What's your advice for those who are further along in their sobriety and may still need to address trauma?
My saying is you either talk it out or numb it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hear about patients who are considering relapse and they call me to talk about the situation at hand, it's always the same thing. Something came up that they weren't addressing.
Yeah.
And so the most important thing is to keep talking. Find your gang of people that you know, the 5 phone numbers, 2 phone numbers, 1 person that you can call 24/7 to share what's going on, to get it out of you so you don't have to push it down into you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What, I sponsor other alcoholics, as we do in the 12-step program. And a guy that I was sponsoring for a while, he's no longer my sponsee, but there was a lot of, in working with him, there was a lot of trauma in his background. A friend committed suicide in front of him. Parents were both alcoholics and addicts. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of, traumatic, violent fights growing up with. And I knew that I couldn't, that I knew enough to feel like you need to address that with a professional, which he started doing. And what is something that people don't know that they should know about within the addiction field in trauma? Or do you think that there is enough knowledge of addiction and trauma within your work?
I was trained by some different trauma specialists, but the most profound is Dr. Gabor Mate. If your audience has not heard about Dr. Gabor Mate, look him up on YouTube. There's really nobody who describes trauma and addiction like him. And
would you spell his name for everybody?
Dr. and then Gabor, last name Mate.
All right.
And he is so incredible because not only is he brilliant, but he explains things in such a basic way that it makes it like your jaw dropped, eye-opening, listening to him talk about trauma and addiction. And my belief is that this is a fairly new way that we're looking at things in this field. As the conversation increases and the stigma decreases, new topics are coming up, and one of them is really how trauma impacts us and has us making choices that are based in numbing out that emotional pain.
Yeah, yeah. Can you give us an example, obviously without naming any of your clients or anything, but just a kind of a concrete story of someone you worked with, or an example of we unearthed this trauma, and
Yes,
all the
I
behavior.
can easily do that. I had a young man yesterday. He's about 24. Charming, skilled, darling, conversational, and I wasn't quite sure how he got attached to using fentanyl 24 hours a day.
Mm.
So I said to him, John Doe, was there any specific event that took you to numb out your emotional pain? He said, I don't know. I mean, my fiance died of a drug overdose next to me in bed about a year ago. And the year before that, my best friend shot my other best friend in front of me. But I mean, I don't know if you think that would do it. And I'm like, do I think that would do it? Of course that would do it. If I were you,
You said that after you picked your jaw up from the floor.
Right. And if I were you, sir, I might do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a threshold at which pain we can endure. And self-harm, whether it's drugs, alcohol, suicide, cutting, gambling, whatever addiction we've got in front of us, it's an attempt to soothe ourselves.
Yeah.
And the threshold of them, and I also have a really deep
solution to, you're right.
It's a solution. And
until it doesn't work.
Right, until it doesn't work anymore. And that's when we see patients and they really have such a fog from their habits that they don't realize that this is just an attempt to solve a problem. The addiction isn't the problem. The liquor isn't the problem. The drugs aren't the problem. The problem is the problem you haven't addressed.
Well said. We ask all of our you're not an addict or an alcoholic. No,
I am not. Actually, I've been in a 12-step program for compulsive overeating for 36 years.
We'll have to have you back to talk about that. Because
yes.
we do want to speak to more people in other programs.
Yes. So I have a 12-step background, but in terms of addiction to drugs or alcohol, that has not been my thing. I prefer cake, but everybody has something. Yeah,
well, I've turned to cake a lot since I've been sober. So
not a bad thing.
Yes. Well, the favorite question we love to ask our guests is, what is the best lesson you've learned in sobriety and how did it help you? And I guess in your case, what's the best lesson you learned in working in the addiction field? Or now that I know you're in a program for eating, it could be with regard to that.
So I would say the best lesson that I've learned in my job in working with, patients is that there is no normal, and that we're so busy judging ourselves and everyone else that we lose sight of the fact that everybody comes with something, and that we have to support each other and support ourselves and advocate for ourselves and others in healing this pain, because that's all we're trying to do with these dependence and addiction is we're trying to heal pain, and that the greatest gift we can really have is to help each other. Again, where I work, we help people get off opiates in a humane way. We're not the only place, but we're a really good place, and we have so many people that care. But in general, whether it's opiates or something else, that the greatest blessing is being able to help people through that pain. and so that they can see a brighter future for themselves, or a future at all.
Thank you. Well said. And listeners, take note. Laura has helped people recover 3,600 plus patients at Advanced Rapid Detox, and within her own family. So Laura, thank you so much. I learned a lot today, and we'll definitely have to have you back to talk about suicide awareness and overeating disorder. I mean, I think there's a lot of experience and wisdom you can share
I
with.
mean, listen, when you've been through a lot, you have a lot to share if you're willing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is no normal. I'm going to remember that.
No.
To all of our listeners, thank you for your continued support. Visit us on soberpodcast.com and all places where you find major podcasts. Leave us a review, sign up for our mailing list. You will also find the contact information in the show notes for our guest, Laura Solomon. This is your host, Jamie Brickhouse. And you can find me every day on TikTok, where I tell a true story wearing high heels. I'm the author of Dangerous When Wet, a memoir of booze, sex, and my mother. And I'm signing out from the Sober Podcast. Tune in next week. See y'all then.